So how much RAM can you have on a 32-bit system? 4 gig.
4 gigs.
But in the 32 is 4 okay. It's just, so there's some way you like these, right? All right, so what's superfetch for?
Uh-oh, fetch things super fast. The fetch things super fast.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, well,
I was thinking about that.
yeah, it makes the prefetch folder fill. It fills the prefetch folder with the last 128 things you've been doing. So they can reload, it fills that extra part of memory that you see in this diagram on the bottom. The memory that is on standby is full of stuff in case you might want it, chosen from things that you used recently. All right, so what's the utility that runs if the file system's dirty?
Check this.
Check disk. And by the way, you were right about switch. Yeah, right. All right, so, yeah.
How about if we put check this Windows cleanup?
Windows cleanup is different. That does not run. Windows cleanup is the thing that deletes files, and it really can't do that without your help. And how often do you defrag an SSD?
Never.
You never defrag an SSD. Okay. Hard drives, how often do you defrag them? Once a week. Does it once a week? You don't have to worry about it. Right. So, and what's that utility with a nice graph of RAM?
Resource monitor?
Resource monitor.
Oh, it's the resource
New one, and very helpful. All right. So, anyway, she asked an interesting question earlier about check disk. You have check disk. So you have check disk F and R, and here it explains from Microsoft what it does. F goes through the allocated blocks of files, but R actually tries to read every sector on the disk to make sure it's good. So that will be much slower. And it's a little bit like what forensic tools do. Forensic tools go into a lot more detail trying to drag out all the leftover data on the disk. But that's good. Anyway, so, all right, we're down to, I think, 22. We're supposed to be out of the So, all right, this stuff is the same for every version. The first thing you might want to know is what you've got in the way of Windows. Now, as you know, you can do start, right-click computer, go to properties, and you get the basic things about your system, like whether it's 32 or 64, how much RAM you have, how fast the processor is, the computer name and things like that. But there's a lot more places you can go. This is one way to get to Device Manager. There's a lot of ways. And the Windows Experience Index is that number. You can see it as 2.0 on this machine. And that's just that one number to rate the machine. System Info is a command line utility that gives you a lot of the same information and some extra things, like the BIOS version and such. Also the WMIC command. The WMIC command is extremely powerful. And if you read Command Line Kung Fu, which I highly recommend, which is the blog where a Linux user and a PC user compete to see how they can do everything on the command line, you learn some useful stuff. And the WMIC is a treasure trove of valuable commands in the command line. But of course, PowerShell is where it's at these days. PowerShell, you can do everything in command line. Microsoft has really gone back to embracing a powerful command line, so you don't need to ever touch the mouse, and you can script everything. Everything can be done from the command line if you're learning Microsoft commands. And WMIC is one of them that can do a lot of things. And then there's MS Info. This has been around for a really long time. That gives you a graphical summary of your hardware resources and some things about your software too. Let's see what I can get from the software here. MS Info. I guess I got to put in .cmd, exe maybe? Maybe it's com. Right. Well, that's Microsoft. I got a real command line because remember we talked about that goofy search. If you search for a command line, you can only find it if you know the whole thing. Here you can execute it without knowing the whole thing. By the way, this is an unsanitary and unsafe practice to launch commands in this fashion, and it violates Microsoft's official best practices, but everybody does it. But when you do this, you do not have any idea what you're running, because there's a whole path. It looks for anything called msinfo.com, .bat, or exe in your current directory, and then it goes through the path hunting for it. So there's a thing called a companion Trojan. You can take over machines with it. It keeps coming back again and again, where you just put a file with a name equal to a system component, it would be executed instead of the real file. Okay, but this is unsanitary when I'm doing MS info. I'm doing this because I do not really know what folder it's in or what the extension is. Oh, I guess I'm still in trouble. But the same thing's true of CMD. Oh, it's MS info 32. All right. Anyway, so here's your hardware stuff, and you can find out about your resources. Yeah. This is the detail of what your IRQs are and such. Here's your ROM. I was just sort of interested in what we get all the drivers in here and the environment variables. This is kind of cool. This maybe did the check disk, that thing we use, the Microsoft driver check, that causes the blue screens. I'd be interested to see what we get for environment variables. Yeah, that's pretty good. There they are. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Lots of information there. All right. And by the way, another one not on that list, which I think focuses on your graphics card, is DXDiag. If you've got graphics problems, this is a good place to go. Yeah, DXDiag. You want to check if your drivers are digitally signed. Ooh, that's neat. Well, let's not do that. But there we are. DXDiag tells you things about your display and other hardware information. And if you want to know about your motherboard, there's a download, CPU-Z, right? Or the CPU-A, CPU-Z, I think, is what you get to find all the details of your motherboard if you want to see information about updating your BIOS and such. Anyway, Microsoft Management Console is a container. It is kind of strange, and I don't know why they did it, but they took a large portion of Microsoft system administration tools and made them into consoles. And you launch MMC and you can add consoles to it. Now this is kind of useless on a client, but it's important in a Windows domain. So if you run something like computer management, right-click computer manage, you are actually using MMC. And one clue is how slow it is to launch. But you can also see it in Task Manager, right? Shift Control Escape, that will give me Task Manager. And if I go to computer management here, which is probably still launching. There, okay, here's computer management. We've used this before, they make user accounts and such. But this isn't Microsoft Management Console status. And you can't tell from here, but you can tell from here. If you go to computer management and go to that process, it's MMC. So it's really running inside of MMC. So you can run MMC alone. And when you do, it's just an empty shell. Doesn't do anything. Then you have to put in snap-ins, which is file, add, remove snap-ins. You get used to this on a server. And then you can add in any of these things: act, certificate, computer management, device manager, disk management. These are all the tools you've been using that are actually MMCs. And the reason why you would want to make a custom console that mixes several of these tools together is if you're on a domain, that way you can delegate responsibility. At this college, I am a administrator of many systems. Like there's 2 Unix servers and I'm root on both of them. That is completely stupid, but the reason that happened is because when I was a brand new teacher here more than a decade ago, I gave my students homework and they would all forget their passwords, and they told me I had to send them to the help desk over at Batmail Hall. So I did, and they got really tired of me sending all these students over to the help desk, so they just made me the administrator so I could change the passwords. And at that time, I knew like 3 Unix commands. I had no idea. And I had the power to wipe out other people's accounts, to go in their files, to elevate other people to administrator, to destroy the system. This is really wrong. You don't want to do this. And at free corporations, you don't do this nonsense. You consider how to give people just the permissions they need, and Microsoft gives you that ability, and that's what this thing is for. You can make a specialized console with only certain tools in it, and you can give somebody the privilege to run that console but nothing else. This is how you can give somebody some limited permissions on a domain. So it's important on domain controllers and in domains, but it's not all that important to make a custom console on a desktop like this. Anyway, so we did that. That's how you can see that you're actually using a snap-in, and Microsoft consoles end in MNC if you launch them from the command line. All right, so here's some of the things that are in there: Event Viewer, Performance Monitor, Computer Management. Lots of those things are in there. You can make a custom console and save it. You do this in the project just so you know how to do it, but it's not something you really do on a desktop. You may do that in an environment with a cascading series of permissions in a domain. So Task Scheduler is really getting quite good, and I must say it's been good for a long time. I used a Windows 2003 server for a while to give students access to practice exams online. We don't have the money for that anymore, but we did. And I wrote my own. I tried to figure out how can I have the students reserve this system, and I couldn't buy any software anywhere that would do it, so I just wrote my own, like ASP, I think. But anyway, but the point is, what I did was there was only one account where a student could log in. They'd always log in as a student, and when they reserved, I just made command lines that would change the password to their password, and I made scheduled tasks. I didn't know if this would work. I went to Task Scheduler, and I made a task schedule that would run every hour of every day of every month. So there were 31 times 24 tasks, and each one of those tasks just did a command line to change the password to the password the student typed in. So they're all using one account, and every hour it would change the next student's password, so you get it, and that totally worked. So I didn't know if you could have that many tasks, but you can. The Task Scheduler is really quite powerful. And now, of course, it's got a lot of cool features. Now you are not restricted to just launch at a certain time of day. You can launch when the computer is idle. You can launch when something happens in Event Viewer. And an event can then launch a task, which is cool. So you could have an event that tells you something's wrong, like the hard drive is 90% full, and it could then send you a text message on your phone, or something like that, send an email. So Task Scheduler is also in MMC, and you can see the active tasks down here, and there are some fun things you can see in Task Scheduler. Let me start it up here. For example, you can see some of the background tasks that Microsoft is using. Now, one thing about the new MMC is you have this thing called an action pane over here, which is completely useless, and my first move is always to get rid of it, because it wastes space. But anyway, here you've got the active tasks. So here's what's waiting right now. Google Update and Adobe Updater. You all know about this. Every blooming time you start your machine, Java wants to update. This stuff runs at 12. Here's more Google updates and AdAware updates. But there's also Microsoft stuff here. Analyze System. I think that's a Microsoft product. And here's Hardware Launch, Mobility Manager, more system tasks. All these things are running. Parental controls. At logon of any user, it's going to run this thing to see if your parents have permitted you to use it right now. Anyway, that's the joy here. You got a lot of. Here's the Microsoft tasks, and one thing I was able to find before, but I'm not finding it so quickly this time is defrag. Here we are. You should be able to see the defrag task. There you are. So here's the detail. Here's the thing we talked about that does your automatic defrag. If you double click a task, you get all the details. And so this is defragging the computer's hard disk space, run with highest privileges. It triggers at 1 a.m. every Wednesday. And under conditions, it will start only if the computer is idle. This is really, really good. This is a new thing. There used to be a thing from Microsoft called Complete PC or something like that. Before they gave away free antivirus, they had this service they were trying to sell that would control your machine, and it was just terrible. You're using your machine, and suddenly it would stop because it decided to defrag the disk or scan for malware or something. And it'd take a half hour to do it, and you can't use your stinking machine. So they finally got this set up here, so it will only run if the computer is idle, and it will stop. If it stops being idle, it will restart if the idle state returns. That's what you need. So if I'm using it, don't defrag the disk right now. Wait. And idle means something like you haven't moved the mouse or touched the keyboard for some period of time, like 5 minutes. So that's good stuff. And here you can say what happens when the task crashes. If the task fails, restart every 1 minute, stop if it runs longer than 3 days. You know, you can determine all these things. You can even say how many times to let it crash before you give up. It's really thought of everything. It's a very powerful interface, and you can program your machine to do lots of good things that way. All right, so we've seen that. Modify a task. So trigger is the thing that makes the task happen. An action is what it does. A condition are additional conditions that may reflect whether it runs or not, and settings are the properties. So you can also create tasks and adjust them from the command line, of course. Remember, everything can be done from the command line. The keyboard for the mouse is optional. And then there's services. Services are things that do not have any direct benefit to the user. They run in the background and are used by other parts, other software to accomplish things. And most services launch before you log in, so they have to run the system account, which is more powerful than the administrator account, because you haven't logged in yet. And they're not tied to your name, they're internal system services. All right, so the services console is here, and you've used it a few times, I think, in this class. You often have to adjust things here, especially on servers. I think I got component services. But here's the actual services snap-in I'm talking about. There are other kinds of services, but this services snap-in can be reached a lot of different ways. And again, you've got this stinking action pane in the way. That's not it. It's where is it? View, customize, get rid of the action pane. Okay, now, so you got all these things going on, adaptive brightness monitors, ambient light sensors, which I don't think we have any, so it's a manual start. Things that start manually will only happen if you launch them deliberately. Things with automatic start is common. These will happen only if, when they're needed. It'll automatically launch it. Things with delayed start, like this, are there to address a complaint. See, there was a time around Windows XP's development when Linux machines started out really fast and Microsoft machines were criticized because they didn't start fast enough. And one of the big crusades at Microsoft was to make the machines start faster. And the first thing they did with Windows XP, they said our goal is to go from power on to a usable desktop in 20 seconds. So what they did was take a bunch of tasks you don't really need and make them delayed start. So the desktop will appear sooner. This was kind of a fraud because, for example, the network card didn't come up until later. So if you probably wanted to open a browser, it was very unlikely. If you actually wanted to open Notepad or something, you could do that sooner. But you couldn't really get on the internet until later. But that's why they have these delayed starts. And I must say, in Windows 7 and Windows 8, Microsoft really got this going. Windows 7 and Windows 8 really do start fast. And Windows 8 really runs fast. Microsoft has focused their attention for the last several years on making their product faster because they got a lot of complaints about how big and bloated and slow it was. And they really did improve it. But anyway, that's what a delayed start is here. The other thing about these is they depend on things. So if I go to certificate propagation, let's find something like DHCP client, let's find server, see what server depends on. Here's server. We talked about this before. This is the thing that makes it possible for you to share your files and folders, act as a server. And you can find out it's logged on as the local system account because it starts before you log in. Here's what it'll do if at first, second, and third failure, and here's what it depends on. This is an important thing to know when you have problems. Look at them all there. So this service cannot run unless those other services are running. This is very common. So when you turn it on, it'll turn on the other things that have to go on, and if any of those fail, it'll stop. So it's a thing to know. Services depend on other services. All right. So here's what you can do with services. You can start them and stop them, pause them, which just makes them stop working but keeps them in RAM so they're available to start again. You can restart, which will shut them down and restart them. This is what you do if you change the configuration. Or you can pause and resume, which preserves all the information waiting in the queue in RAM. All right. Microsoft's Windows 7 is actually pretty good at automatically restarting. The one thing I fairly often see is the screen goes, the desktop goes away, and a box pops up saying, Windows has restarted your device driver, your screen driver, because of some kind of problem. Anyway, all right, here's the various types. Automatic will start when the computer starts. Manual doesn't start until you ask it to. And I think I'm going to close some of these windows. I see people work on coats and stuff. You don't have to control the temperature around here. You can at least close the windows. Anyway. All right, like I say, if you want to log on before you start as a service, you have to have the right, something, your account has to have the ability to log on as a service. The system account has that ability, most other accounts don't. So if you actually want to run a service under another account, you'd have to add this privilege to it. And this, by the way, if you haven't used local security policy, is a really good place to adjust a lot of things. Local security policy is a good thing to get familiar with. You can do a lot of things here, and I think it's account policies. I may not be able to. One thing that's unfortunately missing is a search, which would help quite a lot. There's the passwords. I think what I usually have to do at this point is I have to go use Google to find out where it is in there, because there are hundreds of settings in here. So let me just do it as a demonstration. If I want to log on as a service, and I want to find out where that is in local security policy. All right. This is how you do it. Open local security policy, good. Here's the official Microsoft Word from TechNet. Okay. Local policies, user rights assignment. Okay. Local policies, user rights assignment. There we go. And this is actually a fun place. This is how you demonstrate, this is how you create the difference between administrators and users. You can create a new class of permissions, and you can make the administrators have a different set of permissions if you wanted to by adjusting this stuff. I don't recommend it because it'll drive you nuts, and it'll certainly drive anyone else nuts that tries to use the machine. But anyway, somewhere down here is log on as a service. And that is the privilege, and here's the people that can do that. SQL Server account has it, and the service account has it, which is probably a group, but nobody else. So you could add a group to here, and then they'd have the ability to launch services, which they won't have otherwise. Anyway, all right, there's recovery policies, what happens when it crashes, because these services are always supposed to be there, so you can just configure what it'll do if they're crashing. And there's the dependencies that I talked about before. One really, really, really annoying thing is that every service has multiple names, just to give you a headache. 3 names, and they're not all the same frequently. So here's the browser service. That's the real service name. That's what you use in the command line in the registry. Then there's the display name, which is what they show you. And then there's the executable file name, which is often completely different. And for an enormous number of things in your machine, actually SVC host is what it runs under. So that's annoying. But you get used to this stuff, just like, you know, the thing you see called My Computer is not really named My Computer anymore. It's really named Computer. Anyway, if it had been up to me, I would have said make it always the same name. And always the same name you use in a command prompt. But no. All right, you get to the services pane from Task Manager, of course. And you can control services from the command prompt. And you do it with net command, which is kind of cruel also, because it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with networking. The net command does a lot of things that have nothing to do with networking, like if you want to create a new user account and assign it a password, you do that with a net user command. Anyway, so net start, net stop, pause, and continue to control these things from the panel. All right. And then there's the registry. The registry is a dangerous place. Now, if you start Regedit, you go in here, you can create keys and change values and stuff, but the one thing you cannot do is save. There's no save here, and there's no undo, because this is not like Microsoft Word, where you're editing a document in RAM, and it's not permanent until you save it. This is like you're fixing a car, and you turn it on, and you prop up the hood, and you go in there with a wrench and pliers and start cutting things while the engine is running. Anything you do here takes immediate effect, and there's no undo. So you can really hose your machine. I took a Windows repair class for troubleshooting really bad problems. There was a guy that didn't want his machine to get infected with malware. So he went into the permissions of these things. I didn't even know these things had permissions. But these things have NTFS permissions, and he denied full control to everyone at the root of every key in the registry, thinking this would prevent malware from getting on the machine. What this means is you can't boot up anymore, because the operating system can't read the registry to find the settings. And there's essentially no way to fix this. I actually fixed a problem like that just once. It took a long time and a lot of Google searches, but we booted from an install disk and remotely connected to the registry of the machine and fixed it. But it's not fun. Anyway, you can also do awesome things in here. Now the point, if you go in here and start messing around, you're basically voiding your warranty. If you have paid for a Microsoft service contract and you tell them you did that, they are not going to save you. Listen, you shouldn't have done that. The reason you have Control Panel and these other tools you talked about, like MMC, if you go in Control Panel and you change something, like you go to the desktop, which is personalization, wherever the heck it is, display. Okay, if I could change display settings, like to a different resolution or something, this is a registry change. Everything you do here is a registry change. This is the interface Microsoft gave you to use the registry. If you go in here and do something and mess your machine up, Microsoft will help you. This is what you're supposed to do, but this is only like 1% of the stuff you can do to your machine. You can do all sorts of good stuff in here, and all kinds of cool hacks to make your machine run faster, to make it personalized, to remove malware, involve messing with the registry. But you've got to be a pro in here, and it is extremely easy to get lost in this very deep thing. One of the places you go is each key, current user, system, current control set, on down here. These things are very deep, often 10 layers deep, and it's very easy to be in the completely wrong place, delete things, mess things up. You can also drag these things around and just mess up your whole machine. So be aware. You should learn how to use the registry and get used to it, but never send end users into the registry. No. You don't want them going in there at all. If you wanted an end user to put a registry key in, what you do is this. If I'm doing something, for example, one common thing that happens is Microsoft brings out a new service pack, and there comes a certain date when it will automatically install on all these machines, and your company does not want to deploy it. This happened for several big service packs, like XP Service Pack 2. A large number of companies were very, very worried about XP Service Pack 2, and they didn't want to deploy it automatically. So you had to go in and make a registry hack to prevent your machine from automatically installing it until the company is ready for it. So if I go someplace, local machine, system, there are software, maybe I'll mess with Google. So I'm going to make a key here in Chrome, which I'm pretty sure is harmless. Make a new key, which is SAM. Okay. So now I got a SAM key. And I want everyone to have this key. What you do is you export this thing. Export as a reg file. It's going to go in Documents. This is SAM key. Okay. I save it there. This is the right way to deploy a registry setting to end users, because they don't open regedit. This file, if you open it with Notepad, which edit should do, that's all it is. It just contains a header, and then it contains the key, and if there are values, they'd be down here. It's a plain Notepad file. If you run this file, it will put that value in the registry. Double click it. You want the following program to make changes to this computer. It has to have administrator rights. Say yes. Adding information to the registry. Can unintentionally change and delete value. Are you sure you know? You just say yes, and then it'll put that key in your registry. The keys and values have been successfully added to the registry. That is the right way to deploy a registry update. You send them a file, say run this file. That an end user can do. Never send them here. They tell them to navigate through 10 layers of this and make a change. You will be unhappy with the result. If they manage to, if the machine still works at all after that, then you can use System Restore to go back. System Restore does back up the registry. Anyway, that's the game there. So the 5 root keys are the each key classes root, current user, local machine, users, and current config. And as you should expect from Microsoft, these are very, very strange. They are not stored in 5 files. They're not even 5 independent objects. It is quite confusing. So root keys, these things are called keys. Keys contain subkeys. Keys contain values. They're not folders with files. They look like it, but they aren't. You can't have a key with no value. If you have nothing else, it will always just create something called defaults. And by the way, this is an innovation that came out in Windows 95. Before Windows 95, Microsoft used the same system Unix did. Every program has its own config file. So if you have Apache, it's got apache.config. If you've got DNS, it's got bind.config or name.config. And that Microsoft used boot.ini and autoexec.bat. There are all these little text files with all the settings for every program. They made the decision to sweep them all into this database and put them all in one place. So that's what this thing is. So you have a path leading down to things, and you have to have at least one value, the default value, and then you can have other values. You have as many values as you want, and they have different data types and data in them. So they call this thing a hive, a key with all its subkeys and values, and they call the hives at the top root hives. So if things were logical and sensible, then where's my regedit? I must have closed it. In a logical, sensible world, these 5 root hives would be stored as 5 files on the disk, and that would be it. But it's not that way at all. It's not even close. The hive list is here. Let me just get here. show you how much fun it is to find your way around the registry. HKey local machine, system, current control set. By the way, these control sets are quite important in forensics. You may have, remember this thing called last known good configuration? And there's also a thing called hardware profiles, almost never used, where you boot up, decide whether I'm a portable laptop or I'm at home, my docking station. That's what these alternative control sets are. The one you're using is always current control set, but if you've had different hardware used in your machine, it may have a variety of other control sets available for other hardware configurations. But anyway, current control set, control, hive list, this is where the registry lives. And let me make these things visible as much as possible. All right.
Yeah.
All right, so, all right, so here's, we're going to store the disk, and notice these are the UNC paths for disk. They don't start with C or D or anything. Device hard disk volume 3 Windows. Hopefully I'll knock it off out there eventually. So you got SAM security hardware system default. Notice some stuff here. The SAM, oh, is it on the, is the computer here? No, it's outside. Oh, yeah, it's outside the window, yeah.
That's all I just said. Close the damn window.
Close it all the way.
Turn off that rocket.
Watch this, you can get down if you close the window, that might be the thing.
I can't.
Is there another way?
Wait, where's that little hook that I know? Just close the damn window, that's all you gotta do. Yeah, that works.
Got one more there. Maybe I'll knock it off anyway. All right. Anyway, so here's where they're stored. A bunch of them are in C Windows System 32 config. SAM is the security accounts manager. That contains the password hashes. Security software system default. This is part is logical, but now you have ntuser.dat. There are several different ntuser.dat files. These things are really important. These are your customizations to the registry. And if you take the forensics class, which we're going to have next semester, you can find a gold mine of stuff in ntuser.dat. That is recording everything you do and when you did it. Anyway, then you have BCD. This is your boot up binary configuration data to boot up. And notice, no file at all for the hardware key. The hardware key is not stored on the disk. The hardware key is created by the system every time it boots up by detecting the real hardware that's plugged in right now. It's built during boot up. Anyway, that's where the registry is really stored, and all those files put together, and some of it is only added after you log in. That's why some of this, here's C users S-bound into user.dat. This is the stuff that I did in my personal account. They'll customize the machine, so it'll be added into the registry after I log in. Anyway, all right, that's the game there. Yeah, I'm up there. Yeah. All right. So, by the way, here's the thing. Thank you. And here's the thing I wanted to mention, which was kind of unbelievable. HKey class's root is not even a root hive. It's a duplicate. This is, I don't know why they did this. HKey class's root is merged from two keys within HKey local machine and HKey users, and then presented as a separate key. So that thing is not even a one-to-one mapping of reality. There are two different paths that go to the same place. And this one, HKey current user, is just a duplicate of HKeyU SID. And let me point those out. The SIDs are good fun. Did I keep closing Regedit? Maybe I did. Probably a good habit to keep closing Regedit, but in this case I should have just left it open. Edit. All right. Because you can see the SIDs in here again. If you go to HKey user, rid of that. HKey users, here are the SIDs. So remember, those are the security identifiers of the accounts on the machine. And there ought to be a lot more than that. I know there are more accounts on this machine. But anyway, these are our default accounts, 18, 19, and 20. Those are things like the local system account. These ones that are longer are created by humans, and I have a number at the end that starts at 1,000 and it goes up for the accounts you create. The built-in administrator account is 501, disabled by default. And so the current user is here, And that has settings that I've made, and that all that information is a complete duplicate of the one here with my SID, which I imagine is probably this one. Anyway, that's the game there. I'm thinking it's probably permissions preventing me from seeing the other ones. Just like I'm not allowed to go in other people's folders, I'm probably not allowed to go in their registry keys. All right, so no undo command, no file save. You can back up the registry inside regedit and don't bother. If you want to back up the registry, make a restore point. If you try to back it up inside registry, you have 2 or 3 options, all of them stink. Here's your choices. You can make a reg file, which I just showed you, and a reg file is a plain text document, and that's fine if you want to back up just one key. But you can't make a reg file for the whole registry. You'd have to make 5 of them for the 5 root hives, and they'd be really big files. And if you use them, it's not really a backup, because when you run a reg file, it adds those keys to the registry. It does not remove the keys that are there, so it doesn't really back up the registry and restore it. If there's extra keys, this reg file will not remove them. You can make registry hive files, and those are a binary file that contains the whole registry hive. You can make 5 of those and run them, but the problem is they don't store the path inside the file, so you can actually restore them to the wrong place. Just imagine that. You take that whole tree and put it on the wrong branch. What a mess you'd make there. Anyway, so all these options are kind of bad ways to back up the registry. The right way to do is just make a restore point. But you've seen the registration files, those are useful. All right. And this is the current control set. This is the last known good configuration. This one is backed up. So if you press F8 during boot up and use last known good config, what you're replacing is just this one hive. So that's why it's a really weak repair. System restore is much better. It only backs up part of the registry, but it is the part that is most likely to have been messed up by you putting in an incompatible piece of hardware. So I got a few iClicker questions. Grab one if you like.
We were supposed to present.
I assume that must be a football game or something? Yeah, they don't want anything right here. It's frequently political protest around here too. It could be anything. I taught a class above the Board of Trustees meetings before they finally disbanded it, and the faculty would come in with like megaphones and chanting protests or trying to lecture stuff, you know. All right, anyway. All right, what you need is the most dangerous one to use.
Those are Mac.
Which
one is stupid?
This one's good.
Good.
Sounds good? That's cool.
You know, I went on Rate My Professor, and there's a guy there who I know, and they said his Friday class was BYOB. I wonder if that's true. People bring beer to class, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
That's against the rules, but maybe it's true. I didn't take his Friday class. Anyway, all right. Which utility makes it easy to find the process associated with the service?
Oh, wait, what's this one?
All right, you can do that in Task Manager.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, see, if you wanted to stop a service, you could do it in the Services Control Panel, but if you wanted to find the process, so you terminate that one process, you can do it there too. Let me just try this. Actually, this should be fun. I should be able to do this here. I should be able to find a service. Like, service.
Get into it.
Pick the one you
We just go home and beat it.
Which I'm not finding. Well, let's use this one. And I should be able to go to the process, but only if it's running. Here's one that's running, okay. Session, go to process, and where is it? Well, that's very strange. Let's try another one. Here's one, profile sync, go to process, and nothing. Well, this is pretty,
What if you stop it?
but it's running.
Can you just stop it?
I can stop it here.
Then there's no process.
There,
No,
but
you
it
just
is
stop the
running, there is a
service.
process. It's running.
No, I'm saying if it's not running.
It is running though.
So
This
good
one's running.
process.
Can you just hit stop service
Let's
and
try
it'll make it all?
something like browser. Browser is a simpler one. There's browser. Browser stopped. Wow, neat. Well, let's start it. Neat. Well, my demonstration's sure not working very well. Here's audio. Go to process. Okay, this stinks. Anyway, let me mention, by the way. Yeah, but how am I supposed to? It's supposed to highlight it. It's totally not working on this. Oh, maybe that's it. Oh, thank you. That's what happens. It's not- You gotta show processes for all use. Oh, good. Good. Then we can get somewhere. There you are. So go to process. There it is. So the thing I wanted to show you though is a whole bunch of them are actually SVC hosts. All these blue things. And these things are running like 20 or 30 of those services at once. So you'll find a lot of them are SVC hosts. And if you actually want to understand it, you want to get the sysinternals tool, Process Monitor. Process Monitor, we'll let you see it. Process Explorer. Process Explorer is the tool that will really show it to you. Anyway, so if you want something to happen only when the computer is idle, which tool will let you do that?
Let's see.
All right, and that is task schedule. Let's get it done. All right, and which one gives you a lot of information on the command line? All right, and that is WMIC. All right, so it's 10:07. Let's take a break till 10:20.
Go outside, dance.
Yeah, yeah. You could.
Join the flash.
All the kids get off
I'm
the
gonna put
lawn.
on Process Explorer so you can see it.
Build their own, tell them to do that.
You need a ballpark for
Go out
that.
there with the bat.
Get off my lawn.